We're back together. So, my greetings, dear colleagues, the ones within the floor and the ones that have joined online. Hopefully, you can hear us. Hopefully, you can hear the translation. And I would like to ask you to put on the camera because we can't see you. Okay, hopefully, we have seen you. Yes. Now the first part, culture diplomacy. Yeah, hello, hi. The first part of this platform of cultural diplomacy we have dedicated to the state dimension of this practice and different the projects that the authors and policymakers are proposing, and the Ukrainian Institute was also in the center of attention, and the other contributors. We would like to turn now towards the European dimension and the European and the Ukrainian dimension of Europe. And today we want to talk about what culture and cultural diplomacy mean on the Ukrainian pathway to the EU integration, what Ukraine means for Europe now culturally, and what it will in future, and in general the impact of international cultural relations for the European project. And it's important to look at that not only from the Ukrainian angle, but rather talk about how culture helps in put Europe together, how it helps us understand each other better, to co-create this European project. And the irreversibility of the Ukrainian pathway towards Europe is like a hefty part of this talk that we're going to have. So I would like to start with the question to Ms. Director-General, and that will be about the changes that are now going down in the EU. We would like to ask actually what the new European Parliament means, what new European Commission means for cultural policies of the EU, for cultural diplomacy policies from the EU towards Ukraine, what changes to expect, what priorities to expect, and how institutionally and programmatically will cooperation between Europe and Ukraine look like? Welcome, please.
Thank you, Director-General Sheiko. Dear ministers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having this event and for this opportunity you are giving me to discuss, perhaps with a few general remarks first, how important cultural relations are in particular when it comes to Ukraine's path of integration into the European Union. Dear Volodymyr, I believe you addressed my colleagues already back in March 2023, before I took up the position as Director General in DG Education and Culture in the European Commission. And I've been told many times about your inspiring speech, so really a great pleasure to share the stage with you here today. Only a few weeks ago, our European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, she spoke in front of the United Nations General Assembly and passed a very unambiguous message that we can never match the sacrifices of the Ukrainian people that they are making every day to stay free and independent. But what we can do is to stand by your side and build a common future. And I am, of course, very conscious that right now, as we speak, thousands of brave Ukrainians are fighting for that common future on the front line. A future where the Ukrainian people and their culture are no longer threatened by war and occupation. A common European future, also built on common European cultural space, which celebrates our unity in diversity. And Ukraine's place in Europe adds this diversity, and your defiance strengthens our unity. And as such, we must be part of the defense of Ukraine and its cultural heritage, because it is our common cultural heritage. In the European Union, We've been patiently building our cultural policies and programs for more than 20 years now, bringing stakeholders around tables, sharing experiences and supporting cross-border cultural cooperation and mobility funding networks, platforms and projects. And we must continue to support cultural and creative sectors, especially independent organizations. And we need to support mobility across borders and access to culture also, particularly for young people, to nurture appreciation for diversity, intercultural dialogue and mutual understanding as a solid basis for more cohesive societies and a stronger European Union. And so what does this mean for Ukraine concretely on its pathway towards the EU? We know that Russia's unjustified invasion has specially targeted Ukraine's cultural heritage as part of its objective to undermine the Ukrainian identity, including the destruction and the looting of heritage sites. And all the other cultural sectors were, of course, deeply affected as well. And in response, your cultural sector, your artists and your creatives, they have heeded the call to form a cultural resistance movement. Ukraine's culture is being celebrated worldwide, from the Avignon Festival to the Venice Biennale, the Cultural Olympics in Paris, and even at the Oscars. And the preservation of Ukraine's cultural heritage and support to the resilience of its cultural and creative sectors have been the guiding principle of the EU's actions. We've been working with hundreds of Ukrainian cultural organizations since the very beginning of the invasion to showcase Ukrainian culture in Europe. And we really are looking forward to the recommendations of our expert group of safeguarding cultural heritage, expected later this year, because this will provide guidance for the proper recovery, management, and protection of cultural heritage being designed both for wartime and for the post-war recovery period. This expert group that we have created is led by the European Commission. It comprises several renowned Ukrainian heritage specialists, and more concretely, together with the International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property. It's called ICROM for short. And with the support of the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture, we have funded the training of 23 so-called cultural first aiders from 11 oblasts, including 5 frontline regions. And as part of this training, the team salvaged more than 100 icons, textiles and paintings from the church of Vyazivka, damaged during the ongoing conflict. Beyond cultural heritage, we've also listened to the needs, to the challenges of all other Ukrainian cultural and creative sectors, dancers, choreographers, painters, writers. And we have invited them twice to discuss the opportunities between themselves also and with us. And subsequently, we've published reports on the topic, and the dialogue continues, which is, of course, very important. And moreover, European cultural networks increasingly include Ukrainian members, and European cultural platforms support more and more Ukrainian artists and creatives. And I'm really happy that Katerina Kalitko, who delivered this powerful keynote speech earlier this morning, is supported by the European platform Versopolis and our Creative Europe program. The Ukrainian Institute is working with the European Union National Institutes for Culture, working closely together, and your institute is an associated member. By the end of the month, we will issue the second dedicated creative call for proposals of €5 million to support Ukrainian artists and cultural organizations. And now Lviv intends to apply for the 2030 European capital of culture. So a lot of things are happening. This is really European cultural cooperation at its best. And it gives us great pride that Ukraine is increasingly part of all of this on your pathway to becoming a full member of the European Union. And of course, as a result, we are learning from each other every day. And it really brings me to the main lesson learned from this work we are doing together on culture, on cultural relations. It's first and foremost a lesson of resilience, because with resilience comes hope, hope for a better future, a peaceful future. Our joint investment in Ukrainian cultural and creative sectors is yielding results. It takes money, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes passion, it takes creativity. All, of course, essential factors that you're putting very much at display in your cultural and diplomatic engagement. They are all essential factors, and it's really great to see the Ukrainian Institute spearheading all these efforts. But as Ukrainians themselves have told us, culture cannot contribute to the resilience and recovery of Ukraine if it is not resilient itself. And therefore, the recovery needs of the Ukrainian cultural heritage and of all the creative sectors have been estimated at over 8 billion euro, which is, of course, a vast and vertiginous amount and a complex task, which requires that national authorities work hand in hand with international donors. And of course, Ukrainians know best themselves how to support Ukrainian culture. The inclusion of a reference to culture and to cultural heritage in the government's Ukraine plan is an important step towards more investment to build the resilience of the Ukrainian cultural and creative sectors. So in light of this, here is my call to action for today. Let us all think culture at all times along Ukraine's path to becoming a member state of the European Union. Becoming an EU member state means embracing the opportunities for culture that the EU provides, our programs, our policies, and indeed all these opportunities that it entails for deeper cooperation. And it means finding unity in our cultural diversity. This is the path that Ukraine has embarked upon, and we are all proud to work with you every step of the way to make it a reality. Thank you very much for listening to me, these long general remarks. I'm of course happy to go into, if you feel there is time, how we are going to move forward as the next commission is being shaped.
Дуже дякую, пані Hansen, за ваші ремарки.
Thank you very much for your valuable comments,
І дякую, що підтверджуєте
Ms. Hansen, and thanks for reassuring us in your unwavering support and trust in the values and ideals Ukraine is fighting for. Last spring, I remember your colleagues also made a statement. They were incredibly enthusiastic and passionate about the project that the Directorate-General and other institutions have already implemented in Ukraine. At the same time, I was impressed by this amount, 8 billion euros. What a huge scope of challenges we are facing with. At the same time, we recognize a big distance between the needs and capacities. This is still a pending question. Hopefully, Ukraine and the EU will be able to find an interface to build a bridge to to close this gap. With that, I would like to hand it over to Ms. Anastasia. I'd like to ask her what are the Ukrainian priorities for the Minister of Culture and Strategic Communication. What are the key priorities in the context of our European integration aspirations? In what way can we meet the expectations of the European Commission? What is the point of intersection? What should we strive for, and what is our starting point? Thank you very much. Thank you for these questions. Thanks for having me here. During this talk, I would like to avoid discussing the details of our cooperation. Everyone knows what the situation is and what the scope of damage is as well. Today, I would like to go a little bit off topic. Let's switch from discussing our funding needs, because they are obvious, to our opportunities, to our means to bring value, additional value. Ukraine is amidst of tragic, dramatic events, and we know that this war is not about the territory, but about the identity. We hear a lot of such statements, but unfortunately, the recognition of this fact has not yet impacted the amount of funding for the cultural sphere. I believe it's time to reconsider the role of culture in the national states. Since the full-scale invasion, since the start of a war, we can bring the expertise to the European Union. Culture is always underfunded. It's true not only for Ukraine. This statement will resonate with each and every European state. We've been communicating with the ministers of the European countries, and they always say that the top priority is healthcare, then education, and the culture can rank 3. So it is necessary to invest lots of efforts to include culture into the agenda, to make it high on the agenda. However, the role of culture in the country's security is much higher than the understanding and acknowledgement of this fact. Culture is necessary. We have to combine our efforts to bring the understanding of culture to a higher level. The cultural product should be, first of all, high on demand internally, domestically. During the first panel, we've learned about the need of mainstreaming the Ukrainian culture, making foreigners familiar with its products. It's all about education and enlightenment. At the same time, the cultural product should be also popular inside the country. So what can be done? This comes first, and then we have to promote our cultural products abroad in the European Union. Generally, the role of culture cannot be underestimated in all areas of public actions, including the security. Thank you, Anastasia. Then I have another question. Do you agree with the following statement? As of now, our understanding of culture's role is totally different. I mean, understanding of Ukraine and other countries that are not experiencing war. Liberal and democratic societies typically believe that culture is a space for developing unfolding personality, cultivating critical thinking, and so on. So such understanding of culture is integral. However, since the start of invasion, the culture has become the tool of solidarity and preserving actually the common sense. It's also the way of therapy. Common EU citizens have never experienced such cultural functions. So the question, do you have any conversations with our international partners regarding the changed role and changed understanding of culture? You know, very often I get such questions, or it's rather a comment. The European cultural ministries sometimes say that they do not get any requests from Ukraine to provide funding for the cultural sphere. Then I start talking about humane treatment and understanding of our situation. A prime minister or a president is not supposed to speak in front of the crowd of people who lost their relatives, who lost their property, who lost their extremity, talking about the need to fund just another theater performance. We, who are inside, understand this situation. However, the partners are outsiders. Yeah, they provide the funding, so that's why they select the areas to provide budget for. Let me refer to Maslow's pyramid. At the moment, we have to meet our basic need, our safety and security need, while other countries are now on the tip of this pyramid. That's why they do care for expressing the personality, self-expressing, and so on. We have to utilize this opportunity. We are amidst of war, people die, people lose everything. So we are not in the position to ask for the additional funding for cultural sphere. On the contrary, the outsiders looking at us from distance should be expected to provide funding for the top priorities, for the things they find important, because everyone should realize it's not just, this war is not just about the territories, but about identity. There is such an understanding, but this doesn't mean that we have to ask for additional funding for culture, while we have some basic needs. There should be the designated funding for culture offered from the outside. Thank you very much. Many times we've heard from the international partners that Ukraine does not articulate its needs in the area of cultural policy and cultural restoration. It's sad, of course. On the one hand, there is the understanding of the cultural value. On the other hand, Ukraine allegedly does not ask for meeting the cultural needs. You have clearly outlined the situation. However, the question is whether we can use your words as a justification. All of the past year, I've tried to communicate everywhere I can. At this moment, I can directly ask Ms. Pia to recognize the importance of the culture.
And when it comes to finances and needs, we will go to Vladimir, now just to remind you that the organization is doing RESPAL project that was initiated in February this year, if I am not wrong, and it will last until next year, spring next year. And this project, just in a nutshell, to have a summary, it's to gather, accumulate, and be conscious and be articulating the needs and the condition in which culture in Ukrainian cultural industry is, and to reiterate, to outline the policies, vectors that we need implemented in Ukraine, but also that is possible by the EU as well. Now, could you please share and mention what stage is the project going through? Number two, what have you managed to get from the experts, some of which are part of the floor today? Maybe some interim conclusions from that project you can mention, and what will it mean, or what does it mean for policies in Ukraine and for the EU policies that concern culture and cultural diplomacy? Thank you. Good afternoon. That's called RESPAL, and that's the largest one financed by the EU missions. And over the 30 years, last year's, it's to develop cultural policies, cultural heritage policies, creative industries and media. As I've already said, we're gonna, up until June next year, we're gonna develop policies. But the first thing which we're through with completed the analysis of some substantial political matters to put reforms into practice, to make changes. One needs to understand where a problem is, where the pressure points are for the development of the sector, the barriers, what are the barriers that stand between you and the development. And what we have understood as of 17 sectors, we got almost 18 to 25 reports that gonna be rolled out by sector, by themes, could be real property, could be designing, and so on and so forth, for all those that took part in the work groups. So in other words, that will be a ranking of the most substantial issues when it comes to policies, culture, and creative industries and heritage, because cultural diplomacy, that's my argument, should be honest. In my opinion, this is the third year of the Great War, and this is a heroic period and heroic heritage, which is over this period. And now we're switching to cultural diplomacy that we need to voice out as partner to the EU, speaking about what our problems and how we Ukrainians as society want to deal with them, and the policies we're proposing. Now we have started the second stage of the project. We're already making those policies for the pressing issues that we have designated, and it will be pretty difficult to make a summary of like 800 pages within the 5 next minutes. You will to familiarize, acquaint yourselves with those things, but there are key points. Anastasia has already spoken about the importance of including culture into the scope of themes for national security, because we're expanding on our identity, not only we're warring. That makes parallel processes. That's an issue of heritage. That's an issue of registers and minutes. And we need to speed up, because unless we do it, then our registers will be filled out in the next century. We need to be talking about salaries, like 500 euro. 500 euro is the month pay grade for a person like a museum director, very responsible person, very responsible for culture, for heritage. That's a huge issue. And we're also talking about a lack of people for creative industries, or like their IDPs now, and artists do not have sources of financing to create Ukrainian modern updated product, and the donors are helping us, and we're very grateful. But our money, our budget is something that forms our culture, and what mechanisms we need therefore. For example, how we need to work with a chain of culture institutions, which make like 30,000 plus in number, and they cannot be on budget without technical details. And also the Ukrainian Institute needs to make money somehow to bring it some allocations. Yeah, you know, how exactly is the next question. Yes, we have giant issues that are related with the absence of vision when it comes to policies. So do we allow the people to make money or not? Do we create, do we sell cultural heritage or do we finance it from what budget? Please give us some money to give communities to restore their monuments. Give us money for legal advice to protect our heritage from commercial interests, from corporations that are wrecking the heritage in times of war. That, on the other hand, we got music that can make money, but this is more than 30 years of independence, no royalty collected, no asset managing organization. That's an issue of ourselves as authors, as players, operators, and it's up to us to decide to deal with that. I've just touched on that. If we take financing of institutions, we're talking about 8 billion euros, and I hope very much, my high hope, and that because we're a country that is an EU candidate, I would like us to get structural funds from the EU, and for that, we as Ukraine need to come up with priorities and the mechanics on how exactly those billions of euros need to connect to the cultural heritage of Ukraine, the artists, organizations, except for the cultural fund. And I'm a board member of the institute, right? And I don't know any state institutions doing tendering transparently 3 years financing for our artists, for our communities, organizations to do projects. So I don't know such things. So in other words, we need to change these mechanics for development, and this is our task and what RESPOL works with. We need to align things ourselves and streamline things ourselves. For example, we need to know how to save, how to store, to know what we have retained, what we have lost, what people, what institutions. So we need to learn, and we need to learn to save and keep safe the state, memory, heritage. We need to get ourselves together for the sake of our victory to be identity. We need to learn to get activated. We need to learn to create markets for music, for other different things. We need to monetize better. On the other hand, we need partners' help when it comes to those things like experience of institutional development. So institution to institution, people to people, we need that kind of engagement. We need also integration. We need to learn at the level of institutions on how the EU is working, on how other countries are working. We need experience, and here, just to say again, cultural diplomacy needs to be honest, because we need to voice out the problems that we got, and also talk about what we need to deal to resolve those problems. We Ukrainians, many of the things that you have gone through, you have mentioned, have been circulating in public discourse. We're talking about expert communities, we're talking about some adjacent communities, and I think they never raise some certain themes or points for discussion previously invisible, but now your project highlights and sheds lights and brings it up to recommendations, to guidelines, whatever. So in my opinion, the deliverables of these projects stipulate such radical and drastic redistribution of the game field, that, of the pitch. So the question is it realistic to make such changes? Is Ukraine ready to acknowledge what will be written there and the particular steps to concentrate on state policy, to connect to the state politicians and the EU? Are they ready to listen into those recommendations, and are they capacious, capable to take into account those recommendations, appeals, requests, to make that dialogue very high in contents and practical? If it stays on paper, it will be pretty sad. So do you have this impression with the EU? We can't guarantee anything. This is Ukraine. We got a new minister, and we are getting ready for a meeting, and we are in touch with the ministry. It's obvious that this project is. There are 4 agencies: the Ukrainian Book Institute, State Art, and National Memory Institute. So what we're doing subsequently as experts, we can propose policies that will be realistic within the next 3 years. Then we won't recommend rewriting the budget code, because we are responsible and we understand that's difficult, a difficult thing to do, and that requires crucially different political will. On the other hand, given that we recommend doable things, right? The things that you can do, that you can complete. Number 2, we're in communication and touch, and we're advocating with the organizations that may have an impact. Yes, we will present our developments, because this project is funded by representatives of the EU, European Commission, and we're talking to our partners from the European Commission. And yes, we're going to work around our developments. Operational programs are also stipulated within the project, and that's the mechanics of funding. So how much to whom, in what size, what deliverables, and what influence. So next year, hopefully based on the already policies being developed, we're going to propose. The European Commission, the ministry, and the risk of staying in PDF just on paper, online. There is such a risk, but I'm pretty positive anyway, because there is like procedure for the new minister. In other words, we got a list of what to do, but what exactly to do is what we're developing. And hopefully, but the ministers are churning regularly. So some of them we're hopeful and we're sure will take it under their control and will be implementing. It should not stay on paper. Yes, you're right. And for not to do this, we need to, and we can ask our partners to keep very careful track on that, monitor all the time, and perhaps there will be some sort of resilience as the result of that, no matter what the minister is, who the minister is, or their aides, proxies. Thank you very much. We as Ukraine undertook that Ukraine facility is a tool by the European Commission to support Ukraine on developing and approval of cultural development strategy in March 25. So we are members of that work group. And we have a chance to get all those developments synchronized. And given a strategy, there will be an undertaking, like commitment, and a signal to the European counterparts from the Ukrainian government, because the government wants those policies be implemented within next 3 to 5 years. Yeah, it is important that we're not alone, that the institutions will declare their needs via private contacts, but that eventually will end up in a verified document, which will be very credible. And now I would like to welcome Julija. She is my dear colleague, and she's the director of the Lithuanian Culture Institute. And here we want to talk to Julija a little bit about what actually cultural cooperation within Europe means between eastern and western parts between the ancient members of the EU and the new ones. And in the context of that right now, several weeks ago, it seems Lithuania started its cultural season in France, and Julija and her institute are the main caretaker, the organizer of this event that's been going on for 3 months in different places of France. Now in the morning, I hereby thought that you've been like 20 years in the AU, right? And during this time, what do you think? Has Lithuania become closer to the rest of Europe or not? And actually, what does this season mean to you today? Why did you decide to do it? Why exactly in France? And what are your objectives and things to do? Welcome, please.
So thank you, Volodymyr, first of all, for inviting me. I'm really honored to take part in the panel, and the next time we meet live here for other cities. Actually, I was thinking I would like to reflect a little bit on what was said in this panel, not on what we are doing in the months. Because I think that when it's about the bigger scale representation of the country in any other context, it's first of all about reflection of yourself, of who you are. Because you cannot speak to the other about yourself. You cannot tell your story without, asking yourself about yourself. What would you like to emphasize, and so on. So to go back a little bit to the history of our preparation of the season, I remember that this invitation to the Ukrainian culture field, artists and culture field workers, decision makers, and so on, happened at the beginning of 2020. Then we discussed about what would we like to tell France about, and so on. And you can imagine that after the full-scale invasion started, all the discussion was touched by that pretty strongly. And then we came up with the slogan, which was resilience, actually. And I'm very glad that Pia Hansen mentioned the same keyword, because it was essential to us. And our proposal to what we are going to speak about and so on looked more like a political statement than a proposal of culture event. And we had a long story of discussion together with French colleagues and so on about how should we address the audience and so on. So the second thing that emphasizes is the need of the dialogue, because when you want to represent yourself somewhere, I think it's not about promotion, but it's more about the dialogue. You have to really hear other and find the common sense, find the common ground, and find what is interesting for you, and so on. So the topics that our season is speaking about, in general, there are 3 themes, which is global neighborhoods, empowered identities, and unleashed imagination. And I think that any of us who are here today speaking or listening to the forum would really reflect on these topics in a very different way. But that would be super interesting, to find the common ground. Let us name it like that, because you cannot separate any artwork or any artistic representation from its context. Whenever you speak about historical artwork, art or contemporary art, it's always about the context where it's created. And then you can speak about the country, then you can speak about the historical situation, then you can speak about the artist, his family, and anything around that. So I think that this need of the dialogue, of better understanding of global issues about the context that we live in, is the main engine that is making us do any or other bit. And then I think that our aim as well is not to make artists illustrators, of what we want to tell, politically or in any other sense, but to become integral to it. And when it was said today as well that culture is always underestimated, I think that we should think about the culture as part of the defense budget, because when we speak to our allies, when we speak to our, contributors to come and to defend us, first of all, they have to understand what they are fighting for. And I think that these values and these horizontal values, this integral cultural understanding is the keyword here. So at the end, in the season of in France, in the spring in France, we came up with the slogan, which is the other same. And we invite French people to see yourself in the other, which is the invitation really for the dialogue and for deeper understanding and so on, because we treat ourselves as part of it. We really want to be an integral part of Europe, and I think that when I say we, I mean Lithuania, Ukraine as well, as part of the Europe. And I think that we can add a lot of, in any dialogue of colonization, inclusion, or any other intellectual discourse, and to make it understood, from a very different angles. So that would be my main, try at least to explain why we're doing that and what we are seeking for. And on the end, I also want to conclude with a very practical and also one memory of the inauguration of the season, which was quite a huge event. We inaugurated our season in Pompidou as well as in Sorbonne, and so it was quite a sequence of events which were important for us to be in the main institution, to have our own culture representation in different scale and different audiences. And one of the in France, when we were speaking to them about our inaugurational conference, was telling, "Oh, it was quite exotic, And our reaction was, "But sorry, we don't really want to be as exotic. Even if you think that you are telling us a compliment, we are not exotic anymore. I think that we are other than in many sense. And this invitation to understand each other and to get to know each other is a really honest invitation for both sides, for bilateral or mutual understanding of who we are. And I think there is a lot to do for us, in all the discourses and all the conversations, as long as we continue.
Дякую дуже, Юлія. Це цікаво і приголомшливо.
Thank you very much. It's so thrilling and impressive. 20 years after the formal accession, the perception of Lithuania is still quite dubious. I think this will be also true for Ukraine, which we have to consider in the context of the cultural diplomacy. And I am also pleased to mention that cultural diplomacy is an opportunity to see yourself, oneself, in light of somebody else's perception. I think it's become clear after the keynote made by Catherine as well. Many thanks to speakers. Unfortunately, we started this panel with a slight delay, so we are behind the schedule, but still we've got time for a couple of questions from the audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hands and our colleagues will approach you with a mic. Please first introduce yourself and then indicate who you would like to ask. Thank you very much. My name is Vitaly. I'm from Detector Fly. We know that in the context of European integration, France and Germany have made friends after some years of fighting. So the question is, what is our way of cooperation with such countries like the Slovak Republic or Poland? Who would you like to ask? I'm asking the lady on the stage. You are asking a wonderful question. Yes, but please try to be brief and concise when answering it. Definitely, it is not for us to answer this question briefly and concisely, because it entails lots of discussions. We have to collect the opinions and then discuss them. Indeed, as the practice shows, the reconciliation processes can be observed in the history of many countries, and the reconciliation has been also the topic for Ukraine and other countries. We know that the topic of reconciliation with Poland is highly debated. Maybe some of you have read an article by Mr. Vorobey. He describes clearly all the issues of the problem. In the past, some steps towards reconciliation have already been made, if that's what you're asking about. The main thing is not to stay idle, to continue the progress. I think this is the prerequisite for any development. Unless we invest efforts, we start regressing. This is true for nearly all aspects of life. Or maybe you're asking whether we will cope with this task. Well, any country, even if it's lagging behind, has all opportunities to make a jump ahead and outcompete other countries who have been dealing with this topic for 30 years, let's say, because we can immediately adopt the best practices. We can utilize the experience of others. If you're asking me, as the ministry representative, I will assure you that the ministry is ready to do its best to achieve the reconciliation. Thank you. More questions, please? I see another hand raised. Good afternoon. My name is Katarina Sheis. I'm a student of International Relations University. Will I ask? Shall I ask in English? I have a question to Ms. Hansen. You mentioned that the EU membership is the opportunity to find a place in the cultural diversity. But don't you believe that such a membership can also reduce the sense of cultural identity of peoples participating in this process of joining? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very good question. It's very important to be aware that the European Union's motto, the whole foundation, is that we are united in diversity, and this is very much the motto that we design and go by when we organize and orchestrate our cultural cooperation. It's really to nurture, to harness, and to enable that cultural diversity to unfold, that we make our different calls for participation of different countries, different partners, and fortunately more and more Ukrainian participants in our projects. So I would argue that the path of integration is something that can support and indeed is designed to nourish this whole diversity and preserve it, as we also pointed to when we discussed cultural heritage, of course, in a very difficult situation because of the unjustified war of aggression of Russia. But the whole DNA of the European Union is based on diversity and uniting us around values that indeed harness and nurture this diversity. So I would not be worried that diversity would come under threat. On the contrary, our objective is certainly to make it thrive, make it flourish, when Ukraine eventually becomes a full member of the European Union.
Дякую за запитання і за відповіді.
Thank you very much for both the questions and answers. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. My gratitude extends to our esteemed speakers. Thank you very much.